at the end of the day, perception's reality, and the way that and I've dove into the way that Michigan game turned out and the optics of it, and I think it was a completely different story than what the scoreboard reflected compared to even last year's game and what happened, right? You just look at it, you watch it, the explosive plays Michigan was able to capitalize on. They ended up coming and biting Ohio State in the ass. Like I said, I think they gave up 300 something yards in 6 plays, right? So that's very, very tough to overcome. But the vast majority of that game, Ohio State was, I'm not going to say dominating, but was beating Michigan for the vast majority of that game. And they got, you just can't let that happen, right? And good teams don't let that happen. And I think Ohio State's coached well enough to overcome that. But when I look at this matchup with Georgia, you sent over an interesting thing, George. We text pretty regularly here at the Field of 12 in our group chat, and this is the battle of the two most talented rosters in America when it comes to recruiting. You look at the amount of 5 stars they have, the amount of 4 stars, just the depth and breadth of the way that both of these programs have created cultures of competitiveness and toughness. And I really hope that Ohio State shows up the way that I think they're capable of, because if that's the case, I would not be surprised if this is the most dangerous game for Georgia in the college football playoff. I know I've been really, really high on Ohio State all year. Even after the Michigan loss, and maybe I'm not giving enough teams out there enough credit, but I just watched this Ohio State team, and I really don't think they've played to their capabilities yet. And they've got this chance. And Trevor, you made a great point about Ryan Day's perspective on it and the way that he's probably preaching, the messaging that he's preaching to his team, really since the Michigan game was, no one's giving us a chance. We're as talented as anybody, and it's time for us to go prove it. And I have enough confidence in Ryan Day and the program for them to be able to do that. So to kind of, I hope I answered that question, George, but I mean, to me, this is the most intriguing matchup of the college football playoff.
Yeah. And the most heavyweight one.
Yeah.
To your point, Hack, when we were all looking at that in our group chat earlier this week, 5-star players on their roster of the 4 teams in the playoffs. Georgia has 15 5-stars. Ohio State has 14. 4-star players. Georgia has 53. Ohio State has 52. And 3-star players, Georgia has 17. Ohio State has 16. You can't get more equal than that. Converse to that, 5-star players, Michigan has 3 and TCU has 1. That's it.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's been built on teams. And, yes, these staffs have done a hell of a job of development. But it's a whole lot easier and better to develop a guy that's a 5-star than develop a 2-star or a 3-star. They come in loaded.
And let's not get it twisted either, George, because I want to say this. I think this is a point that all of us will agree on. Stars, you could take them for what they mean, right? But at the end of the day, when you're evaluating a player coming out of high school, they have a certain skill set, they have a certain body type, they have certain attributes to earn that, right? Whether it's whatever 4-star, 5-star, whatever it is, if you're considered in that elite group, you have something. And ultimately it's about where you go and how you get developed. And both of these programs do a great job of doing that. So it's not just like getting a flash in the pan 5-star guys. These guys are used to developing talent like that. They're used to developing talent like that, putting them in situations to be successful and putting them in situations to be highly productive at the college level. So for me, like you said, man, when you just roll the rosters out, if both of these teams play to their best of their capabilities, maximum capabilities, this is going to be a straight up slugfest. So
I'll say this too. You look at these matchups. I mean, this is a college football playoff committee dream. The way that it kind of shaped out, if it was any of these other teams in any other positions here, right? Georgia playing either Michigan or TCU first, not near as appetizing to me. I want Georgia playing Ohio State because I think it's the best matchup. And then that at least gives you the opportunity, if Ohio State can knock off Georgia and Michigan can knock off TCU, to get the matchup in the national championship that would bring in just a ridiculous amount of money to college football. I mean, I think that I love these matchups for the semifinal, and regardless who ends up in the final, I think it's a great storyline.
Trevor, Ohio State has to do what to come out with a win in this?
I think two things, and they're very foundational football, but it's been characteristic of Ohio State this year. They've got to run the football.
Yep.
They've got to run the football so they can have a balanced attack, and then they've got to have a defense that comes out with their hair on fire, and whether that's forcing turnovers, minimizing explosive plays, or just being sound all game long. It's defense and it's running the football, in my opinion, if Ohio State wants to have a chance to beat Florida or to beat Georgia, excuse me.
Hack, your opinion, you go the same way with that?
Yeah. I think, Jim Knowles lives and dies by the three ball. I've talked about it a little bit. I host another show with Josh Perry, and he and I talk about it as well. He's okay with giving up 4 or 5 explosives because he expects those explosives to be able to be overcome by the overall productivity of that football team.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't happen against Michigan, right? So I'm curious to see with this amount of time how he approaches this game. Physically, I think they match up fine. They're going to have to force Stetson Bennett to beat them. I think they're going to have to force Stetson Bennett into some third and longs, third and mid-range where he's dropping back and throwing the football, and you need to be opportunistic and be able to get a couple takeaways. And I'm just curious to see the overall game plan defensively in terms of how they approach this game. And then offensively, I think you make a great point. They have to be able to run the football, and CJ Stroud has to just facilitate to these playmakers. Some of these other guys have to step up outside of Marvin Harrison Jr. A lot of talent in that room. We've talked about it all year, but I think some of these other guys have to emerge as true threats to another team. So they take a little bit of pressure off of 18. If they can do that, I fully expect Ryan Day to have a great game plan and be able to punch and counter punch with a Georgia defense that's going to come out with their hair on fire, as they have with every game that has a bunch of light and meaning to it. They're going to be able to counter punch better so than like a Tennessee did, right? Because a Tennessee is who they were. I think this Ohio State offense has a little bit more flexibility to mold themselves and kind of react to the environment as opposed to try to force their style of play down someone's throat. So it'll be really interesting to see how those two things. So it's more of a schematic thing and how they put these guys in positions and what they're willing to give up and what they're willing to try and take advantage of.